Welcome to Theology of Love. Does suffering have meaning? If God is love, then why do we experience so much pain and suffering in this world? I think this is probably one of the most important questions we can ask in this life, because it points us to something deeper about our experience, about ourselves, and about the nature of reality itself. Usually when many of us think about suffering, we have a tendency to see it as something that was wrong immediately with our experience, or even with ourselves. We tend to feel that something has gone wrong, that something is out of place, or that somehow, this pain means something more. It means there's something faulty within us. Sometimes people even believe suffering means they're being punished, that they have done something wrong, that they deserve this somehow, and what we are going through, or that this life itself is somehow against them. I understand why people think that. I really do. When pain hits us really deeply, especially when it's unexpected, when it is prolonged, when it strips away something from us that we love, when it confuses us, when it humiliates us, or even when it leaves us disoriented, it is very natural to immediately assume that something has gone terribly wrong. It is very easy in those moments to believe that suffering is only an interruption, only an injustice, only something evil imposed on us for no good reason at all. I want to be careful here, though, because I'm not trying to minimize anyone's pain, and I'm not trying to tell anyone that suffering is pleasant, or that grief is somehow easy, or that if you are hurting deeply, you should just think differently and everything is suddenly going to make sense and be better. I don't believe that at all. Pain is real in this life. Suffering is real. Loss is real. Fear is very real. Heartbreak is real. And when we are in the middle of those things, it doesn't feel theoretical. It feels overwhelming. It feels immediate. And oftentimes it feels like there's only one thing that's really there in the moment: our pain. So I want to say it plainly, that I'm not trying to bypass suffering. I'm not trying to dress it up in spiritual language too quickly or something like that, because I think that it can feel a little dismissive and sometimes even a little cruel. When someone is in the middle of deep pain and suffering, they usually don't need someone to explain it away. They need presence. They need space. They need patience. And they need to know that they're not alone. They need to know that they're still loved in this world, even if they cannot feel that love very clearly in that moment. Once we have enough space to breathe, once the sharpest edge of the pain begins to soften just a little, I do think it becomes worth asking even whether suffering is only indicating that something is wrong. Is it only some evil interruption in our life, or is there something deeper happening that we often miss? Now, where I land on this right now is that suffering is not punishment. I don't believe suffering is inflicted on us because we're bad, and I don't believe it's proof that we're spiritually defective. I do not believe it means that God has abandoned us, and I do not believe that pain is arriving in our lives because reality is against us in some ultimate sense. I think that is one of the older ways that human beings have understood suffering, or maybe we should say misunderstood suffering. In many religious and cultural frameworks, suffering was often interpreted as moral accounting. If something bad was happening to somebody, it must mean someone did something wrong. If disease came, if tragedy came, if loss came, then maybe God or the gods were displeased. Maybe judgment had arrived. Maybe someone was paying the price. I understand why people once thought that. It gave structure, it gave explanation, it gave meaning to a world that held a great deal of confusion, and it gave people a way to organize a very painful world. But I don't think that's the deepest way to understand suffering, and honestly, I'm not sure if it ever was. Because the more I sit with suffering, both in my own life and in the lives of others, the less I can see it as punishment. I think suffering belongs much more to the nature of embodied life itself. By that I mean this. To be here in this life is to be in a body. It is to be limited. It is to be vulnerable. It is to experience contrast, especially with others. It is also to know pleasure and pain, joy and grief, gain and loss, connection and separation, clarity and confusion. This life comes with all of that built into it. It's part of the reason why we came here. And because it does, we become attached. We become attached to our bodies, to our health, to our relationships, to our success, to all of the ideas that we have, to our identities, to how this life is supposed to go, or at least how we think it's supposed to go. We become attached to the people, places, and things that help us feel safe. Once we become deeply attached to these things, suffering intensifies whenever any of those things get threatened, shaken, or taken from us. So I don't think suffering is just pain by itself. I think suffering has a great deal to do with attachment. It has to do with how deeply we identify with what is temporary, fragile, changing, and limited. It has to do with the stories that we tell ourselves about what those things mean to us. It has to do with the boxes that we build around our lives, and then we mistake those for our whole identity. That is where suffering becomes especially powerful, because suffering does not just hurt. It distorts our ability to see clearly. It distorts our perception. It distorts the way we see ourselves. It distorts the way we see others. It also distorts the way we see reality. If we are not careful, it begins to distort the way we see God too. When we are hurting deeply, we often stop hearing love clearly. We stop seeing it clearly. We stop trusting it, not because it's not there, but because pain narrows perception. It becomes like a prison of interpretation. The event happens, the loss happens, the heartbreak happens, and then we begin to tell ourselves a story about what it means. We tell ourselves that it means we are bad, that it means we deserve it, that it means life is against us in some way, that it means love is gone, and that it means this pain is all who we are now. And I think that is where so much of the deeper suffering comes from. It comes not from only the pain itself, but from the false stories that we build around it. We erect a prison of perception. We put up all the walls, we install all the bars, and we lock the door, and we live inside that interpretation as though it were the whole truth. But I don't think it's the whole truth. I think one of the first cracks in that prison comes when something inside us begins to sense that this pain, as real as it may be, is not the whole story. Something inside us begins to say, maybe quietly, maybe faintly, maybe without words at all, that this hurts, but this is not all that I am. This feels devastating, but it does not feel native to who I most deeply am. There must be something more here. That something more matters. It really matters. Because I think suffering, when it is met with rightly, does not create the deepest truth of who we are. It reveals it. It reveals where we are attached. It reveals what we have identified within us that is far too small. It reveals where we have mistaken the body, the ego, the story, the role, the success, the relationship, the wound, or even the fear of our deepest self. When those things get shaken, what starts to come into view is the question beneath it all. Who am I really? For me, that's where this whole conversation turns. I don't believe I'm only my body. I have to be more than my body. If I am only the body, then pain is ultimate, loss is ultimate, death is ultimate. Suffering has no deeper meaning beyond what we can measure immediately. I understand why many people live there. I understand why many people turn only toward what can be seen, touched, and proven in front of them. But I also think that the very act of asking deeper questions points to something beyond that. The longing itself points, the hunger itself points, the fact that we keep searching for meaning points to something more. So where I land on this right now, on this, is that we are more than a body. We are more than the ego this body constructs in time. We are more than the stories that we tell ourselves. And we are more than the fear and more than the pain. I believe we are the energy of love expressing itself in this incarnation, in this life, through limitation, through individuality, through experience. I believe that this life, with all of its contrast, all of its beauty, all of its grief, and all of its intensity, is one of the ways love comes to know itself more deeply. If that is true, then suffering starts to look different. It is not good in itself. It is not pleasant in itself. It is not something to romanticize, but neither is it meaningless. It becomes part of the ride, part of the mechanism, part of the medium through which we forget and remember, forget and remember, forget and remember. Life to me is like a roller coaster in this way. When you're on the ride, the drop feels real, the fear feels real, the intensity feels real. But the ride is not meaningless because it includes those things. In some strange way, this is part of what the ride is. I think that this life has something of all of that in it too. Not because your pain is small, not because your suffering does not matter, but because there may be something larger holding the whole experience that we can see while we are in the small, sharpest part of it. And when we're done, there's an exhilaration. Life also feels to me like a finely tuned Swiss watch. It is so intricate, so layered, and so beautifully complex that if you open the back of it, most of us would not immediately understand how all the gears and mechanisms work clearly. But we can usually tell when something is in sync and off, when the time is not working right. We know when we are aligned with love in the same way and when we are not. We know when something in us feels deeply true and when something feels distorted. We may not understand the whole mechanism, but we know when it tells the correct time. We know when we are out of rhythm. I think suffering can be one of the things that points that out most clearly to us. It shows us the limits of this life. It shows us the boundaries of the body. It shows us how incomplete a purely surface level identity really is. And in doing that, it points us beyond itself. It points us towards something deeper, towards spirit, towards worth, toward love, toward the divine within us that keeps calling us home. Now, when I say home, I do not mean escape from life. I don't mean heaven in some strange sense. I mean return to the deeper truth of who we are. I mean return to the knowing that we are more than the wound, more than the fear, more than the role that we play, more than our bodies, and more than the stories we tell. I mean return to the truth that beneath all the fragmentation, there is still love. There is still wholeness. There is still something in us that suffering cannot fully and finally destroy. So does suffering have meaning? I think it can. I think it often does. But not always in the neat way people want. I don't think every instance of pain arrives with a simple little message attached to it. Sometimes suffering is just a part of the ride. Sometimes it's a part of the intensity of being here in this life. But when we are willing to look deeply enough, I think suffering teaches us to look more deeply at what we really are, which is love. Maybe that is why gratitude matters so much here. Gratitude to me is not just saying thank you for your pain. It is not pretending everything felt good, and it is not denying grief. Gratitude is what arises when something in us recognizes truth again. It is what happens when the distortion clears and the lesson comes into full view. When we realize that what felt like it was breaking us was actually revealing us. Gratitude is the feeling of coming back into alignment. It is the recognition that beneath the pain, something real was being shown to us. That is why, for me, suffering is not the end. It's not the destination. It's not the final truth about us. It is a revealing. It's one of the ways this life presses on us to look deeper, question more honestly, loosen our grip a little, and remember what we most deeply are. As always, where I land right now is that we are love. Love is not just a feeling. It's not just romance, kindness, or warmth. Even though it can include all of those things, love is the deepest reality there is. It is the ground of all being. It is the substrate of all created things. It is what reality is really made of. It is what we are made of. Suffering and pain, hard as they are, can become one of the ways we are led back into that knowing. Not all at once, and not without patience, not without presence, and not without honesty, but still, it leads us back to it. So if you're suffering right now, I don't want to rush you. I don't want to explain your pain away. I just want to say this to you gently and honestly as I can. You are not alone. You are still very loved. And this suffering is not the end of your story. If, when you're ready, you begin asking deeper questions of it, you may find there is something here that is not only hurting you, but it is also pointing something out to you, pointing you towards something deeper about yourself, about reality, and about the nature of love itself. Now, I would really love to hear where you land on all this. Do you think suffering has meaning? Do you think it teaches us something? And if so, what do you think it is trying to show you or show us? I do not think this life is really about arriving at perfectly fixed conclusions. I think it's more about learning how to ask deeper and better questions. Maybe that part is the beauty of it all. Well, thank you for joining me. And as always, I love you deeply. And I will see you in the next chapter soon.